December 17, 1944. 5:30 hours. Hansfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank's engine coughed, sputtered, then died. SS Abashto Benura Yahim Piper slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the metallic clang echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. His driver, Unshah VBR, attempted to restart the 700 horsepower Maybach engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge read empty. Herr Oberenura VBR called up from his compartment, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The reserve tank is also dry. Piper climbed down from his command tank, his boots crunching on the frozen Belgian soil. Around him, the most powerful armored spearhead the Wehrmacht had assembled for Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Ardennes offensive, sat motionless. 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's most elite Waffen-SS soldiers, all paralyzed by empty fuel tanks. Through the morning mist, Piper could see the abandoned American position ahead, Hansfeld, a critical supply depot for the U.S. 99th Infantry Division. The Americans had fled so quickly they'd left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still hot in metal cups, and there, lined up like a gift from the god of war himself, stood rows upon rows of jerry cans, thousands of them, the distinctive olive-drab American fuel containers. Piper approached slowly, almost reverently. His adjutant Halperdam Führer Hans Gruller pried open one can and sniffed Benzin Herr Oschanführer high-octane gasoline as his men began the frantic work of refueling their vehicles. Piper walked among the stockpile counting. The mathematics were staggering. 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River. Enough to potentially change the course of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single depot than most German divisions had received in the past 6 months. But as Piper stood among this bounty, watching his men pour American fuel into German tanks, a crushing realization settled over him like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to abandon such quantities, if they could leave behind what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then this war was already over. Germany hadn't just miscalculated, Germany had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of its enemy. 6 months before Piper's discovery at Hansfeld in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented the Führer with a report that should have ended all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Leuna works, which had produced 175,000 tons of fuel in April, managed only 5,000 tons by September. The Burgios hydrogenation plants at Pitz, Bleehammer, and Brooks were operating at less than 10% capacity. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production, and captured Romanian fields, managed 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American production. The Third Reich was attempting to wage mechanized warfare with horse-drawn logistics. While America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance, Major Friedrich Simman of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had calculated that the Ardennes offensive would require 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler allocated 5 million gallons, but only half was actually delivered due to transportation problems. The German High Command was betting the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a strategy that revealed terminal weakness rather than strength. The Americans, meanwhile, had constructed a petroleum pipeline system across France called PLU, Pipeline Under the Ocean, and the Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system that delivered 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the front lines. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day and receiving 1.4 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves while fighting. Joachim Piper was not a fool. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had learned that in modern warfare, fuel was more precious than ammunition. His Kampfgruppe had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point of the entire Ardennes offensive. On December 14, 2 days before the offensive, Piper attended the final briefing at Tundorf. General Sepp Dietrich, commanding the 6th SS Panzer Army, was blunt. "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." The fuel allocation for Kampfgruppe Piper was 31,000 gallons, enough for 50 miles of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse was 65 miles. The mathematics of failure were built into the plan from the beginning. As his column prepared to advance on December 16, Piper issued strict orders. Tanks would operate in single file to conserve fuel. Engines would be shut off during any halt longer than 5 minutes, and the capture of American fuel dumps was priority one, above even tactical objectives. The contrast with American operations could not have been starker. That same morning, Captain James Rose of the U.S. 743rd Tank Battalion, stationed just 20 miles from Piper's starting position, recorded in his unit diary. Received fuel resupply 8,000 g, third delivery this week, storage tanks already at capacity. December 16, 1944. 0530 hours. The German artillery barrage that opened Operation Watch on the Rhine used more ammunition in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire operations earlier in the war. But even this impressive display masked critical shortages. Piper's column began moving at 7 a.m. already behind schedule. The roads, which on German maps appeared as highways, were narrow country lanes, many unpaved. Within hours, traffic jams developed as vehicles designed for the Russian steppes struggled through the Ardennes forest. At Lanzarote, Piper's first objective, they encountered unexpected resistance from a single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon. 18 men who held up the most powerful German armored column for nearly 10 hours. During the delay, Piper's vehicles sat idling, burning precious fuel. When they finally broke through and reached Hansfeld at dawn on December 17, Piper's column had covered 20 miles and consumed 40% of their fuel. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the halfway point to the MOS. The American supply depot at Hansfeld was not even a primary facility. It was a forward supply point for the 99th Infantry Division, what the U.S. Army classified as a Class 3B depot, a temporary fuel station. Yet what Piper found there exceeded the monthly fuel allocation for an entire German panzer division. Hauptführer Hans Grauer later testified, "We found pyramids of jerry cans, each containing 5 gall of gasoline. They were stacked 3 m high, extending for perhaps 200 m. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy them. The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline mixed with motor fuel 80 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the temperamental Maybach engines in the Tiger tanks, were designed for 74-octane fuel. The American gasoline was actually too good, causing engine problems in several German vehicles. At Douglas Long Beach, 38 of 41 62 employees were women. Rose Wilman Rowe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas reduced defect rates from 3.2 to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands, inadvertently improving efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, while better positioned workstations decreased injuries. German intelligence interpreted female employment as desperation. A captured Luftwaffe report dismissed these workers as temporary, predicting quality collapse. Instead, precision improved. Women excelled at detailed work. Wiring, instruments, inspection. Their integration represented democratic strength, not weakness. As American production soared, Germany retreated into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jager program in February 1944, dispersing production into 729 underground facilities using slave labor. The middle complex employed 60,000 prisoners in horrific conditions with 20,000 dying. These underground factories produced more defects than aircraft. Slave laborers sabotaged components. Transportation between dispersed facilities caused delays. Quality control collapsed. The entire middle work complex produced fewer engines monthly than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction across 4 facilities with completely interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29 costing $65,000 each incorporated technology Germany couldn't match in prototypes. By early 1945, America was producing 100 B-29s monthly. June 6, 1944 demonstrated the culmination of American production. The invasion employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 superiority. This wasn't tactical advantage, but industrial annihilation. Between January and May 1944, preparatory bombing dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, exceeding all German bombing of Britain throughout the war. Transport aircraft delivered 3 airborne divisions in one day using more planes than Germany's entire transport fleet ever possessed. By December 1944, single raids involved 1,200 bombers escorted by 900 fighters. P-51 Mustangs possessed range to reach Poland, performance to match any opponent, and existed in quantities making losses irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere simultaneously. As defeat approached, even Nazi leadership acknowledged the production catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." Hermann told his staff before D-Day, "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for every one we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler admitted to share in January 1945. "We should have listened to Bertika's reports, their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Albert Shaw later testified that American bombing reduced German production by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks. He stated unequivocally, "The American attacks, which followed a definite system of assault on industrial targets, caused the breakdown of German armaments." Germany's M262 jet fighter operational mid-1944 represented genuine innovation, 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore air superiority despite numerical inferiority. But Germany produced just 1,430 Mi-62s total, with never more than 200 operational simultaneously. Engines required overhaul every 10 hours. Critical materials were unavailable, forcing inferior substitutions. America, meanwhile, had begun jet development in 1942. While the Bell P-59 proved inferior to German jets, Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German jet, entered production before war's end. American industrial depth allowed simultaneous pursuit of multiple technologies, a luxury Germany couldn't afford. The contrast epitomized the production war's outcome. Germany's technological superiority in jets meant nothing against America's ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters while simultaneously developing next-generation aircraft. Quality without quantity proved worthless in total war. Hermann Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945 by elements of the U.S. 36th Infantry Division marked the beginning of his confrontation with reality. Initially defiant at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, he maintained German technology had been superior, overcome only by numbers. His subsequent transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, the dedicated facility for high-ranking Nazi prisoners, brought intensive interrogation. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler conducted extensive interviews documenting Göring's evolving recognition of American industrial superiority. "I knew American industrial potential was great," Göring admitted to Heckler. "But the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at peak. It was incomprehensible." He expressed particular astonishment at American logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while maintaining domestic production. This was beyond our conception. We couldn't adequately supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." During his trial at Nuremberg, prosecutors presented Göring with overwhelming evidence of American production superiority. Charts showed America producing more aircraft monthly by 1944 than Germany managed annually. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines played while prosecutors listed German cities destroyed by bombers from that single factory. Göring's March 14, 1946 testimony revealed his struggle to comprehend the scale. "I believed the economic and technical potential of the United States to be unusually great, particularly the Air Force. But I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." Prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert documented Göring's obsession with production statistics. He repeatedly calculated ratios, comparing single American factories to entire German production. He seemed particularly fixated on Willow Run, calling it that damned factory that broke our backs. When shown that America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the figures in silence. The mathematical reality of defeat was undeniable. The transformation scope remains staggering even today. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, America produced 295,959 by war's end, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, 98,684 others. This represented not just quantity, but systemic superiority in every aspect of production. 2 million Americans worked in aircraft production at peak, including unprecedented diversity. Women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens. This democratic mobilization achieved what totalitarian command could not. voluntary cooperation that exceeded forced labor's output by every metric. The workforce that entered factories in 1941, knowing nothing about aircraft, emerged in 1945 as the world's most skilled aviation workers. They didn't just build planes, they revolutionized manufacturing itself. Statistical quality control developed for bomber production became standard industrial practice worldwide. Automation principles pioneered at Willow Run transformed global manufacturing. The engineers who designed bomber assembly lines would design the Saturn V rocket. The women who riveted B-24s would raise children who walked on the moon. The production miracle didn't end with victory. It launched the American century. The financial dimensions defied economic orthodoxy. Aircraft production consumed $45 billion in 1940s dollars, equivalent to $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet rather than bankrupting America, war production created unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment, which had plagued the Depression decade, vanished completely. Personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. War bond sales by workers themselves financed much of the expansion. Willow Run workers alone purchased $45 million in bonds funding their own Factos operations. Germany, conversely, consumed 40% of its entire industrial capacity for aircraft production by 1944, yet produced less than half American output. Slave labor, increasingly relied upon, proved catastrophically counterproductive. Sabotage was endemic. Quality collapsed. Productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943 while American productivity increased 300%. The production infrastructure built for war became the foundation for post-war prosperity. Aluminum smelters built for bombers produced materials for suburban housing. Chemical plants that made aviation fuel created plastics for consumer goods. Machine tool factories that equipped aircraft plants tooled up American industry for global dominance. Beyond raw production lay organizational excellence. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies seamlessly. IBM punch card machines tracked millions of components across thousands of suppliers. MIT's Radiation Laboratory, employing 4,000 scientists, developed navigation systems that gave American bombers all-weather capability. When combat revealed B-17 vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. When Pacific operations required extended range, Consolidated modified B-24s without stopping production. German modifications took months or years. American improvements took weeks. This adaptability proved as decisive as production volume. American aircraft evolved continuously based on global combat experience. Information flowed from Pacific battles to Atlantic production lines within days. German aircraft produced in isolated underground facilities by slave labor remained static while American designs improved weekly. The feedback loop between combat and production achieved unprecedented efficiency. Pilots' observations reached engineers immediately. Engineers' solutions reached assembly lines within days. Assembly line workers' suggestions reached designers directly. This democratic flow of information proved superior to German hierarchical command. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter. In it, he made his most complete admission of the production war's significance. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His last recorded statement to Gilbert was equally revealing. We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed. They didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized production itself. Every aspect of their system proved superior to ours. Göring committed suicide that night, but his final testimony stands as history's verdict on the production war. The Reichsmarshal, who had dismissed American capabilities, died knowing a single American factory exceeded his entire Air Force's lifetime production. Military historians consider the American production achievement the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been impossible. The bombing campaign unsustainable and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, the leading historian of the air war, concluded, the outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. The Allies won because they buried their enemies under an avalanche of production. The numbers support this assessment absolutely. By 1944, America alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined. Axis and Allied. This wasn't incremental superiority, but order of magnitude dominance. Germany faced not defeat, but obliteration. Yet, the production miracle's significance transcended military victory. It proved democracy's superiority to dictatorship, freedom's advantage over tyranny, voluntary cooperation's strength over forced obedience. The workers who achieved this transformation weren't slaves or conscripts, but free citizens united in common purpose. Hermann Göring's dismissal of American production capacity stands as history's most catastrophic miscalculation. His contempt for democratic industrial potential cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to recognize American capabilities sealed the Third Reich's fate before the first bomber reached German skies. The transformation from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually demonstrated that free societies when facing existential threats could achieve the impossible. American workers didn't just meet Roosevelt's impossible goal, they doubled it. They didn't just match German production, they exceeded it fivefold while simultaneously fighting in the Pacific. Today's leaders would do well to remember Göring's mistake. Dismissing democratic nations as weak because they are peaceful, or underestimating free people's productive capacity, because they prefer prosperity to conquest, invites catastrophic miscalculation. America in 1940 appeared unprepared for war. By 1944, it had become an unstoppable industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines could be as decisive as front lines, that assembly workers could be as crucial as soldiers, that industrial mobilization could determine victory as surely as military strategy. Göring learned this lesson too late at the cost of his nation's destruction. From his dismissive reaction to Roosevelt's announcement in May 1940 to his execution at Nuremberg in October 1946, Hermann Göring's journey traced the arc of Nazi Germany's destruction. His contempt for American production became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with capability, that mistook tyranny for strength, that believed racial mythology could overcome industrial mathematics. The Reichsmarshal, who dismissed American aircraft production, died knowing that American factories had produced more planes in 1944 alone than Germany managed throughout the entire war. His mockery of democratic industrial capacity became history's most expensive joke, paid for in the currency of total defeat. America produced 295,959 military aircraft. Germany produced 94,677. But the real victory lay not in numbers but in method. Proving that free workers could outproduce slaves, that democratic cooperation could exceed totalitarian command, that a nation of immigrants and diverse citizens could unite to achieve the impossible. The B-24 bombers rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes weren't just aircraft. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet driven by a woman who'd been a housewife months earlier. Each engine built by a teenager who'd left high school to serve. Each wing assembled by workers who'd fled poverty and discrimination. All proved that free peoples, when united in righteous cause, could bury tyranny under an avalanche of production. Hermann Göring laughed at the idea of America producing 50,000 planes annually. America responded by producing twice that many, transforming global history in the process. His laughter echoed through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation. The fatal dismissal of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither democracy nor production. In the end, both buried him and everything he represented under 300,000 aircraft that turned his contempt into history's most complete defeat.